Yes.
Okay, so let's get into the meat and potatoes, if you please. Let's talk about title insurance. Why don't you tell us what title insurance is and why this is beneficial for your clients?
Okay. Title insurance is an insurance policy that you get to protect your legal right to own that property. There are two different types of title insurance. There's a lender's policy and an owner's policy. And the lender's title insurance policy only protects a lender. So if you are getting a loan, then they are going to insist that you pay for a lender's insurance. That does the individual no good. It is only for the lender.
Mm-hmm.
It protects the lender in case there's any deed title, so that they want to make sure that they are insured. And it is pretty much always required that it is purchased for their sake. Then there's also an owner's title insurance policy that is a separate policy that the buyer of the property always gets, and it protects that buyer or owner of the property for the entire time that they own the property. And this is issued after a title search is done. We have done all of our due diligence to make sure that all liens are cleared on the property and that we are issuing a clear title insurance policy for that buyer. However, there are instances when the search misses something on title. And so this owner's insurance policy protects that buyer. And so if anything were to pop up on title after the fact, then our underwriter, First American Title, that insured it, would take care of that issue and all attorney's fees and everything and cover the buyer on that.
Now, I may want to double back to that question a little bit because I'm curious to know when you say it takes care of all the attorney fees, et cetera, what other obligations and responsibilities might one have in the event that there are some omissions in the process?
Well, I mean, it depends on how big the issue is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if there, say, was a lost heir that was missed, you know, that heir did not sign off on the property properly, if everything didn't go through probate and was legally done, and there's a long-lost sister somewhere that should have gotten part of the property, then the title insurance policy would pay that off to that sister and it would not, it would clear the title at that point, again, for the owner.
Oh.
There's all kinds of different scenarios that could happen that could possibly be missed on title. It doesn't happen often, but sometimes it could be a really big cost to get it corrected, and that's what insurance is for.
Okay, so that provides quite a bit of peace of mind, I'm sure, to anyone who's closing on what we may consider to be most people's largest investment they'll ever make. Is that right?
That is right, and that it's a one-time fee, and you pay it at closing. It's generally not more than $100 to $200 more than the lender's policy because it's a simultaneous issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that one-time fee that you pay at closing, and you just always are rest assured that you're protected for as long as you own that house. So it's always in the buyer's best interest to purchase it.
All right, very good. Has there ever been a case where a person loses a home through either title insurance or I guess not having it?
Yeah, there's been many cases. I can't cite one right now, but people have not opted to purchase owner's title insurance, and it's really come back to bite them. And they have, in that case, they have to handle the issue. And so it's been very costly for people, and at times, I'm sure we can Google many instances of people losing their home because of not having owner's insurance. So it's such a minimum cost. It's so much nicer just to have that insurance in case anything ever were to crop up. So,
yeah, I'm sure that's got to be a harrowing experience to have to,
I'm sure there's horror stories out there. I've read them over the years, but I can't think of one right now.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I'm sure that anyone who is listening, if they have had that experience, they would know, and anyone else would not want to ever have that experience, and that's why you're there at Baymark Title to help them and educate them so that they're able to protect that investment. And as you say, it's such a small price.
Yes,
yeah.
It is. I mean, it's almost a no-brainer, but I mean, it definitely is the buyer's choice to purchase it. They always can say no.
Right.
That's why we're here, is to make sure that they understand what it covers and the advantages of having it.
Okay, well, let's talk about some people who already have title insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any need, occasionally when you talk, say, commercial insurance in other areas, you have insurance agents who say, well, you need to go back and kind of look at your coverage and update it, et cetera. Are there any cases where that's necessary with title insurance?
No,
okay.
There's never really any need to do that, other than maybe, say, you add $100,000 worth of improvements onto your home.
Mm-hmm.
You can always go back and pay for the difference of that owner's policy.
Oh, really?
Whatever the difference of the increase would be, you could do that, and so that your policy covers. You probably would have to get an appraisal to see what the value difference was in order for them to be able to say, okay, yes, you can pay for this much more owner's insurance, and that way you're protected. But at that, most of the time, title's already been satisfied and cleared, and generally there shouldn't be a need to do that, but it is allowed.
Okay. Now, you touched a little bit on what happens when a family can't find an heir or maybe assumes they have passed on. So if they show up to claim the property, is there anything different that they do or that is required in a condition like that?
Well, they would find out who closed that loan. They would look at the deed and see who prepared the deed and call that attorney or call that title company and say, hey, you forgot about me. And that's when we start scrambling and go, oops. And that's when we get our title insurance company involved and do our research, our due diligence, and be sure that it's actually true. We're not going to just give money to people when they come up and say, hey, I should have gotten some of that house. We would have to do our research to be sure that they're telling the truth and, get our paperwork together. But if it were the case, then that title insurance company, the underwriter, would pay out the claim. Until something like that comes up, we don't know because we've done all we thought we needed to do at the time.
What happens when people have the same name and maybe things get crossed up there? How do you handle a situation like that?
Well, they're very common names all around. And say there's liens that pop up on a title and there's a John Smith. Well, there's probably 100 John Smiths. So we have to get their Social Security number and call each attorney that says there's a lien against them and verify whether or not it's them.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that can be a grueling task because that's a lot of calling and a lot of verifying, but it has to be done. And if the lien belongs to the seller, then it has to be paid off at closing and cleared up, which sometimes can kill a deal because there's not enough money or equity in the home when they're selling it. If it's against the buyer, then if it's less than the sales price that they are of the home that they're purchasing, then it can be made exception to title on their owner's policy, which means that because they didn't own the property when we pulled title, as soon as they buy the property, that lien attaches to it if it's theirs. And so if they were to ever go refinance or if they were to sell the property, at that point they would have to clear that lien up. So it's made an exception on the policy that we already knew about it and that nobody can come back on us and say we didn't verify it.
Let's say we have a deed that's recorded incorrectly. If an attorney makes an error or an omission, what kind of ramifications do, say, attorneys face in situations like that?
We have to, and it happens all the time, we have to go and track down whoever prepared that deed incorrectly, get them to do a scrivener's affidavit, which they have to prepare, and they say, oops, we made this mistake, replace this with this, or add this, or delete this, and that has to be recorded, and it gets attached to that particular deed. And sometimes that's hard to do, especially when it's a really old deed. Sometimes, if it's really old and if it's something pretty minor, we can get First American, our underwriter, to indemnify it. They would do an indemnification agreement, which would satisfy the people that are doing the new loan and issue that. But, yeah, I mean, there's many times that lot numbers are wrong. That has to be corrected. The whole legal description sometimes is wrong. The person's name sometimes is wrong. They were married and should have been unmarried. There's any sort of instances where a deed has to be corrected, and you have to track down the person that did it to get it done. So lot of investigating. We're almost kind of like investigators sometimes.